Hello, this is Christian Idealism, and today I wanted to discuss with you guys what is the distinction between science and pseudoscience. Okay, so here's the thing with this distinction. There is no really agreed upon way to solve the demarcation problem. The reason why is because a lot of the solutions to this actually runs into counterexamples. I will propose my solution near the end, but I want to give you just kind of a rough sketch of some of the solutions to this issue. So the first, I guess, solution to the problem is that science is anything that is falsifiable. This was the view of Karl Popper, and basically on this view you would say something like, well, whatever is science is something that isn't searching for the truth, but rather anything that's just falsifiable. Doesn't mean that it is false, just means that it's specifically falsifiable. So there's an experiment you can do to show how your theory failed to make a prediction or something like that, right? There's 100 different problems with with falsificationism. That's one solution, but it doesn't work for very different reasons. And I'll just give you kind of the two main ones. The first reason is that, well, pseudoscientists can make falsifiable claims. So let's say if I'm an astrologer and if I tell someone, like, hey, you're going to die tomorrow in a car crash, right? If I make that prediction, and then let's say that person doesn't die the next day. Well, I made a falsifiable claim, and yeah, my theory was false, but that's not the point. The point is that I made a falsifiable claim. And so, well, falsificationism is not really going to work on that picture, obviously. Like, just because I can predict the future and then it be proven false, it doesn't make astrology scientific, right? Pretty obvious example. The second problem, though, is there's the Duhem-Quinn thesis. And this thesis would say that a hypothesis cannot be falsified in isolation. You can only falsify a conjunction of hypotheses. So typically you have the main hypothesis and then a collection of what's called auxiliary hypotheses that go along with it. And in order to confirm or disconfirm that conjunction, you're going to need to do, you're going to have to assume that conjunction. And the issue, of course, is like for any possible experiment that we can do, there's always a way you could say, like, hey, it was only one of the auxiliary assumptions that was falsified and not my main hypothesis. And so actually, on this account, even scientific hypotheses are not strictly falsifiable in the sense that the falsification wants it to be. So yeah, those are just two general problems with falsificationism. There's plenty of other objections that people have, but those are like the two main ones that you'll find in the literature. So yeah, that solution doesn't work, obviously. Falsificationism, got to get rid of that. That view is not going to work as a solution. Then there's other kind of solutions. So another solution might be that science has to be empirically adequate, right? And that anything that's not empirically adequate is not a science. Well, I mean, in that sense, there are obvious counterexamples to that as well, right? Astrology is empirically adequate in some sense. Like you can find certain patterns in the stars to look like certain gods, right? Does that mean that astrology is true? No. Just because you can find patterns that look like people doesn't mean that astrology is a science, right? So empirical adequacy is not a sufficient criteria. So that's not going to work as a solution. Now here's the solution that I have. Okay, this is my solution, and this is actually Kuhn's solution. So there's this philosopher named Thomas Kuhn. He wrote a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And his solution to this problem was basically that what distinguishes science from pseudoscience are kind of two main things. So number one is whether the theories in question are aware of the anomalies that they face. And number two, are the people that do the science, so the researchers, are they actively trying to solve the problems with their theories? And if so, when they're solving them, do those solutions lead to an extension of the theory? So that's kind of that's Kuhn's kind of solution to the demarcation problem. Basically, what distinguishes science from pseudoscience is not whether it's falsifiable, but rather whether. So there's kind of two main things. Number one, are the researchers aware of their anomalies? And number two, are the researchers, when they try to solve their anomalies, are they actually extending their theory, expanding their theory? And a good like an actual science is one that does that, right? So it's this progressive research project versus a pseudoscience which actively either ignores the problems with the theory, or any solutions that they try to come up with actually fail to extend the theory, fail to explain the data itself, right? And so, yeah, so here's another example, okay? Young Earth creationism. So young Earth creationism, I would say, is a pseudoscience, because the reason why it's a pseudoscience is not because I know, so they can fulfill the first criteria. They can say, hey, we're aware of like these problems. The issue is that any solution that they propose to solve the problems with young Earth creationism don't actually extend young Earth creationism. It's not like the theory of the theory of a young Earth is expanded upon to account for the data. Like, all their solutions to the problems are purely philosophical. Like, for example, like you have Kent Hovind that says, well, God decided to make it appear that the Earth, appear that the universe is old, or like, yeah, the stars are so far away and the light reaches to them because God made it that way. Like, here's the problem. When you have to change the laws of nature to account for the data, that's when your theory falls apart, because not only, like, you can't do that. Like, that's pseudoscience. You can't just change the laws of nature into whatever you want to account for the data. Like, that's not, like, the reason why it's pseudoscience is because that doesn't actually, like, help. You can do it, like, anyone can do that. Like, I could do that. I could say, well, the universe was created 5 minutes ago, and this video, all your memories and all that stuff was just planted here, right? Not only is that not a falsifiable claim, but, like, that doesn't really expand our knowledge in any kind of way, right? And so, in some sense, the reason why young Earth creationism is a pseudoscience is precisely because it fails to meet the second condition. It fails to the theory of young Earth creationism. When they're trying to solve their anomalies, it's not actually a progressive research program. Like, it's just completely and utterly insufficient. Like, they're not able to explain the data in a very simple way. Whereas with actual science, right, when you explain your anomalies, you're actually expanding your theory, and given that new context, you can actually not only can you explain your background knowledge or your background data, but you can also explain this new data, and now you have like a new model to account for it. And so, in some sense, you could say one of the very important conditions of the second criteria is that a theory you can actually derive in some sense. So whatever your extended theory is, so whatever the extension of that theory is, there's an in principle way you can derive that extension from the core contents of the theory, right? So here's one example that some people find convincing. So let's talk about evolution, right? Like, right now, there's a whole literature on what's called the extended evolutionary synthesis, okay? And what that does is it basically tries to extend evolution beyond what Darwin thought, beyond even what neo-Darwinism is, trying to account for the total data in question, right? I mean, of course, there's new discoveries happening all the time, but anyways, the point is, like, there's a way you can connect the extended evolutionary synthesis from the principles that Darwin established, right? But for young Earth creationism, you cannot get the proposition, like if the proposition is that, oh, well, the laws of nature are different, or it just appears that the Earth is old because God made it that way. You can't get that from the core contents of young Earth creationism. You just can't do it. Like there's no way to like get that kind of extension. Whereas for the evolution example, you can get the extended evolutionary antithesis, and you can derive it from where you can make a connection to the core principles of evolutionary theory that Darwin himself established. And so that's the important characterization of meeting that second criteria. And so, yeah, that's my solution to the demarcation problem. Not every philosopher of science is going to agree with that, but given that I've been doing these videos for a few weeks now because that's what I specialize in as my undergraduate. I study the philosophy of science. I've been studying it for the past few years, and the more I learn about it, the more I can actually understand, okay, this is how science works. This is how we could solve these issues. So yeah, anyways, I don't want to get too much on a tangent. But yeah, that is my solution to demarcation problem. So yeah, anyways, if you guys are interested in more, I'm going to be doing more videos, especially on the philosophy of science. But I hope now you have an understanding of what pseudoscience is, and then what are some solutions to that demarcation problem I mentioned. Anyways, have a nice day.